Well, congratulations. You have accomplished phase 1 or level 1 of Shamata, which is directed attention, meaning that you have been able to direct your attention to a chosen object. That is exactly what we did with our meditation this afternoon, where you, with intention, narrowed the scope of your attention to, first of all, the 5 sense fields, and then to sound, and then to tactile sensations, and then to tactile sensations of the breath. And so tonight we are going to continue at a very rapid pace, actually, through the first couple of techniques, and actually we'll encounter tonight probably one of the best known meditation techniques of all techniques, which is breath meditation with the breath focused, attention focused on the tip of the nostrils. So after directing our attention to a chosen object, the next very important element is training to sustain our attention where we have directed it. And inevitably, it won't be long before our attention is abducted. Something comes along, you are attending to a voice, for instance, and all of a sudden something intrudes. And it could be, in the case of trying to focus on tactile sensations of the breath at the nostrils, it could be a memory or a fantasy, something that takes you away from the present moment experience to the past or the future. So it's as if one of these thoughts or memories or fantasies comes along and abducts you. It's like chloroform rag, a anesthetic is put on your nose, and you're kidnapped and thrown in the trunk of a car, and you wake up someplace, and out 10 minutes later, you're thrown out of the trunk, and you wonder, how did I get here? Because it oftentimes are, especially in the very beginning of meditation practice, it's as if we are waking up from a dream in the morning, and all we can remember are just hazy images of earlier in the dream, and all we can remember is the last image that we woke up with. And so oftentimes our experience of mind wandering is like that. One moment we are focused on the sensations of the breath at the nose, and then we spontaneously disengage from our mind wandering after wandering for some period of time, and all we remember is the last images that we recover our lucidity with. And we can't generally, in the beginning anyway, recall the entire train of associations that led to this point where we finally recovered our lucidity. So what we are trying to do, and what we will do in some of our later practice, when we get into the practice of Dujam Lingpa, will be letting the mind wander, but being lucid and watching the entire process, so that it basically becomes like watching a dream unfold. But now what we are going to do, and in Dzogchen practice, this isn't really emphasized a great deal. These techniques working with selective, exclusive, focused attention on a particular place. Tomorrow we're going to move right into awareness, which is open and receptive. And this is the real flavor of Dzogchen and Mahamudra meditation. So these techniques are really primarily known in the Theravadan tradition of really focusing attention on particular points of the body. But they're very, very helpful for the reason that I mentioned earlier today, that this is what allows us to give a mute switch to that ruminating mind. Because when we are focused selectively, exclusively only on sensory inputs, one of the 5 senses, or tactile sensations, the wandering mind goes dim. And neuroscience has proven this also, or found this with neuroimaging, that when the mind is focused on one of the 5 sense fields, what's called the default network, which is associated with wandering, so I just call it default wandering. The default network goes dim, and when our mind is wandering, all of the sensory circuits go dim. So the two just aren't compatible. They don't operate at the same time. And so we use that basic fact to dim the torrent of thoughts and memories, everything that is taking us away from the present moment. So our strategy is to remain in the present moment by focusing only on one of the 5 sense fields. And with breath meditation, the sense that we are using is tactile sensations, the sense of touch. So there are 2 very important ingredients to develop stability of attention. And those 2 are mindfulness and introspection. Lama Tsongkhapa says in the Lamrim Chenmo, the concentration that you will accomplish here has 2 special features: vivid intensity and intense mental clarity, and non-discursive stability, staying one-pointedly on the object of meditation. And then curiously he adds, some add bliss to these, making 3 factors or 3 features. So why not add bliss to that list? And I think that many of us experience that. When your attention is stable and vivid, there is a sense of well-being, of sukha, that just feels very good, feels blissful in a sense. And so let's add that 3rd one to the list. Lama Tsongkhapa then continues, since the development of this sort of vivid intensity is blocked as long as there is laxity, while one-pointed non-discursiveness is blocked as long as there is excitement, laxity and excitement are the chief obstacles to achieving genuine concentration. So these are the 2 ditches on the side of the road. You have in the left ditch, with mindfulness being the center of the road, and we're trying to drive down the road and stay on the road. And the 2 ditches that we're trying to avoid while staying on the road is excitation or distraction in the left ditch and laxity or dullness in the right ditch. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, he said these are the 2 problems, excitation and laxity. And these are the only 2 problems really that there are to deal with all the way through this approach to developing shamatha through level 9. So it's just more and more subtle manifestations of subtlety, of laxity and excitation that we are dealing with as we progress through the stages of shamatha. And then Lama Tsongkhapa continues, here, concentration refers to your attention remaining one-pointedly on an object of meditation. In addition, it must stay with the object continuously. 2 things are needed for this. 1, a technique in which your attention is not distracted from whatever it is it had as its original object of meditation. And 2, an accurate awareness of whether you are distracted and whether you are becoming distracted. The former is mindfulness, and the latter is vigilance. And vigilance now, Lama Allen translates that term as introspection, or introspective awareness. So these 2 are what really are absolutely necessary for creating the stability of meditation that leads to progress in shamatha. It is both mindfulness and introspection. And we'll focus on introspection in detail, I think it's tomorrow night, in one of these highlight sessions. But suffice it to say right now that introspection and mindfulness have to evolve together. That if you focus only on mindfulness without introspection, that you're going to plateau very quickly in your meditation progress. And there are interesting ways of cultivating introspection as well that I'll go into tomorrow. So you could say in the context of attention focused on the breath, mindfulness is going to mean something different when we get into dealing with awareness. But mindfulness in this sense, you could say, is your present moment of attention continuously engaged with an object of your choice without forgetting. And a lot of the classical definitions, I have a number of definitions from Asanga and Kamalashila and others about classical definitions, but they kind of take us astray from this, what the purpose of mindfulness is right now for developing single-pointedness. So this will do it for right now, your present moment of attention. So and attention is selective, exclusive, and focused. You are eliminating everything else to focus on one object. And so that should lead you to realize that it is an abstraction, it is conceptual, because that is not reality. You are really eliminating everything else to focus on one thing, but that is I guess the important thing is what you are eliminating along with everything else is that discursive conversation that is playing in your mind. And so this is really what is allowing us to develop the single-pointedness, at least in the early stages. And so what does it mean then if I tell you to watch the breath? Here in this context, what it means is that we are following the breath. So we're certainly not watching it with our eyes, and we are not visualizing it. There are certain tantric practices and purification practices where you do that, where you actually visualize the breath entering and leaving your body as smoke, as clear prana, etc. But we don't do that. We don't visualize it. We're not looking at it. So to watch the breath means that you remain continuously engaged with the tactile sensations of the breath. And we are going to then choose where to focus our attention. There are a couple of classical alternatives. The Burmese technique is to focus on the tactile sensations of the breath at the abdomen. And this is the entire path of Shamata in the Burmese technique, as I understand it. That basically you're watching the rise and fall or the expansion and contraction of the abdomen and sensing that as movement. And so that is described as a very coarse tactile sensation because the movement is very easy to find. It's really noticeable. And so tomorrow, I'm not going to guide that meditation, but tomorrow in your individual practice sessions, you can just do that. Place your attention on the tactile sensations. Maybe I'll do that as one stage of our guided meditation tonight, because it is really easy to find, and because of that, it's very good for coarse excitation. If your mind is very excited, it's good to choose an object that is easy to find and one that is can rivet your attention, because there's such a obvious movement of the abdomen in and out that it can really keep your attention focused there. But so to follow the breath then means that we are continuously engaged with the tactile sensations of the breath. And the tactile sensations, we are engaging with what is often called bare attention, means that there is no conceptual overlay or no conceptual knowing of the breath, but it is just a simple, naked sense impression of the tactile sense domain. And so exactly in the way that the Buddha described to Bahia in his famous sutra, which is Bahia is the had the shortest route in all of Buddhist history to becoming an arhat. He heard these words, basically, and by the time the sutra was finished, he became a stream enterer. So this was the Buddha's pith advice to him. In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, there is only the heard. In the sensed, there is only the sensed. In the mentally perceived, there is only the mentally perceived. So you strip down each of the 6 primary consciousnesses only to that single element, and you don't let them become combined or mixed. So for our purpose now with breath meditation, it is in the felt, there is only the felt. And so we follow the tactile sensations through the full course of the exhalation. This is the approach of the classical Theravadan Buddhaghosa, commentator from the 2nd century. He said that the way that we stay continuously engaged with the full course of the exhalation is to follow it from the beginning of the inhalation through the middle of the inhalation to the end of the inhalation. And then what's very important is that what you will probably discover is that there is a pause. It's as if you reach slack tide, meaning the point between high tide and low tide, when there's just no movement at all. So you finish an inhalation, and then there is a brief pause before you begin the exhalation. And then, so what's very important is to remain continuously engaged with the tactile sensations of the breath when there is no movement of the breath. This is challenging because I think of distraction loves a vacuum. And it only takes a small vacuum for distraction to rush in, and then off you go. You're abducted for 5 minutes, and you wonder, how did I get here? So the key to eliminating distraction is continuous engagement, and that is the key. So continuous engagement through the full course of the inhalation and the full course of the exhalation. And Lama Allen and Dzogchen practice and Mahamudra in general really emphasize the importance of relaxation as a key to developing shamatha, because what we are giving up and what we are relaxing is grasping. Not only grasping to concepts, self-identities and things like that, but grasping to results, grasping to an agenda for this meditation practice. And so what we do is, the key is to begin with relaxation. And this is the practice of settling the body in its natural state that we have been doing. So it's not only relaxation, because we relax every night when we fall asleep as well. So the key here, the first, Lama Allen describes the progress of shamatha as 3 balancing acts. So the first one is to relax deeply without losing the clarity that you begin your meditation with. So in order to do this, as I explained last night or yesterday, that we have to break the habitual association of deep relaxation and falling asleep. Because for many of us, this is the only time that we deeply relax, is after a hectic day when our head hits the pillow and we just pray to God to fall asleep as quickly as possible. So we need to break this habitual association of deep relaxation and drowsiness, and then begin to develop what is an anomalous form of attention that nobody teaches. This would be one of the most important skills to be taught in all primary schools, is how to get into flow, this state that positive psychologists talk about for high performance. So great athletes, musical performers get into this very anomalous state in which you're simultaneously deeply relaxed but brilliantly clear, because relaxation alone isn't good enough for peak performance, nor is just clarity good enough, because clarity can, if you're very anxious or angry, you have great clarity, but you're not going to be performing at peak. So you need to develop this anomalous form of attention, which is simultaneously deeply relaxed and brilliantly clear. And I think that many athletes talk about being in the zone, for instance, and it feels like a state of grace oftentimes when they are describing it. So they know when they're in it, they know how different their performance is when they are in it, but most people don't know how to get into it. So these techniques of meditation are exactly how you get into it. First of all, you deeply relax, but you maintain the clarity of your awareness while you're doing that. So the second balancing act, after you have developed deep relaxation and balance that with maintaining the clarity that you begin your meditation with, is then to develop stability without losing relaxation. And this is a common issue, I think, for meditators, in that they insist on stability too quickly, and when they should actually be working on relaxation, or relaxation balanced with clarity. And if you insist too quickly on stability, it's just like a mother who has a crying 2-year-old infant, and she says to the infant, "Stop that. If you're going to cry every time you're hungry or you're tired, you're never going to amount to anything in this life." It would be insane, wouldn't it? It's insisting on its discipline too early in the life of this infant. And this is as crazy as that is exactly what we do if we insist on stability in our meditation practice without having, first of all, achieved this bedrock relaxation and clarity. So we only concern ourselves with stability in meditation practice when we have established a point of relaxation and clarity that can't be shaken by the adding of stability. So if we are striving and demanding or insisting on stability too early, then we're going to lose our relaxation. And so we don't do that. First of all, focus on relaxation, and then when it's appropriate, then we're going to concern ourselves with stability. So this is wisdom for your practice, but we're going to assume that you already have that, and we're going to concern ourselves now with stability. So you've already taken care of the relaxation, I'm just assuming. This whole retreat is, in a sense, a time-lapse view, very quick, of 10 years of practice condensed into 8 days. And so don't think that you have to achieve this relaxation or that it's necessarily going to be achieved within one day. It could take months of retreat, actually, in order for you to achieve this deep relaxation. And people in long-term retreat report that after 6 months, they just keep finding more and more subtle degrees of relaxation. And what you will find, even in this retreat, is that as we progress into awareness meditation and working with mental appearances, that your relaxation has to reach a new level of subtlety. And if you are still agitated, or you have agitated prana, now we really start working with prana, that you're going to find it much more difficult to not be distracted, to actually be entering a lucid dream, in a sense, in the waking state. So the second balancing act then is developing stability without losing the relaxation that you cultivated in step 1. And then the third balancing act is developing vividness without losing both the relaxation and stability that you developed in steps 1 and 2. So in the final culmination then of these balancing acts, you have vivid attention that is both stable and deeply relaxed. So that's what we are trying to do. So when we are beginning our meditation practice and really beginning to work on stability, a natural reaction is to think of training the mind like you're training a dog. And sit, stay, or heel, and pull on the leash. Heel, sit, stay, or a stern father disciplining their child. You kids, shut up. Tell that to your mind. So you parents know, does that work with your children? Or everyone was a child once, did that work for you? When your parents told you that. So that stern parent or the dog trainer just doesn't work. What you need to do is to begin with relaxation. And one of the ways that we do that, a very important way, and another element last night we got into settling the body in its natural state and settling the speech in its natural state. So the natural state of speech, last night I said, was effortless silence. And there is another element of speech settled in its natural state, which is the breath settled in its natural rhythm. And so it's very important as we're doing breath meditation, especially in Dzogchen practice, to give up all control of the breath. And so there are a lot of misconceptions, or different approaches, I should say, about this. And so one of my early meditation teachers, for instance, and this is very common in the yoga traditions, say that you equalize the inhalation and exhalation. And in the yoga traditions, it's often very commonly stated as 5 heartbeats. So that your inhalation should be 5 heartbeats and your exhalation should be 5 heartbeats. And one of my early meditation teachers told me you should feel the heartbeat in your eyelid. So that really is pranayama practice. And it is really strictly controlling the breath, because you have a conceptual idea that this breath of equalizing is better. Or some traditions, like Kashmiri Shaivism, say that what you do is to extend the length of the exhalation so it is about 2 heartbeats longer than the inhalation. So again, that is a pranayama practice, and that is the opposite of what we are doing here in this practice. Here, to settle the speech in its natural state, or to settle the breath in its natural rhythm, means that we give up all control of the breath. You surrender control of the breath. So the breath is easily controlled. And the ego will control anything that it can. So we bring to our practice an idea about which breath is better, and I would prefer that my breath be equalized, the inhalation and exhalation. I would prefer that my breath be longer than what it is. So we give up all control, and by doing that, something very important happens. We discover what this breath is. We discover the reality of this present moment breath without controlling it. And if we have a conceptual idea of the breath, what it should be, then we already know what this breath is. And so we don't need to stay continually engaged with it. And so when we give up control of the breath, we really are able to engage with these 2 qualities that make the breath such an excellent object to develop single-pointedness with. Why this has been so successful over the years, over the 2,500 years of the Buddhist tradition, and why this is recommended as the best object to choose if your primary obscuration is discursiveness. And so when I mentioned the Mahasiddha Maitripa, said there are 3 types of shamatha. The first one is shamatha focused on a sign, meaning an object. So Padmasambhava in Natural Liberation says that actually you begin your meditation whole career path of focusing on a sign, but that sign is a stick or a stone. So you focus on an inanimate object and you just look at it and without distraction for as long as possible. And so then he continues by saying, do that for 1 day and then move on, grow out of that very quickly. And so what is the benefit, what advantage does the breath have over a stick or a stone? Well, the breath has 2 very good attributes. First is that there is a continuity between breaths. From this breath to the next breath, the breath is largely the same object. So your introspection can tell you whether you are still focused successfully on your object, on your chosen object, or your mind has been distracted to an object that you didn't choose. So because the breath is more or less the same, there's a continuity from one breath to the next. That allows introspection to give you immediate feedback when you have a new object or a different object has taken your attention. But a stick or a stone also is constant. But the problem with a stick or a stone is that it is too constant, and it leads to boredom. And so the enemy of clarity is boredom, because that will put you to sleep. It will lead your attention to go looking for something more attractive or more important than this boring old stick or stone. And so the other really excellent quality of the breath is not only is it similar from breath to breath, but each breath is different. It is dynamic, it is living. And the beginning of the in-breath is different than the middle of the in-breath, which is different than the end of the in-breath, which is different than the exhalation, etc. So because it is constantly changing in this dynamic process, it keeps you really vividly engaged with this because it's fascinating, actually. And so because of this, when you surrender all control of the breath, you are able to be surprised by the breath. Sometimes the breath will be short. Sometimes it will be long. Sometimes it will be ragged. And you surrender to the breath without preferring that this breath be different. This surrender of the breath to the breath also is preparing us for where we are going when we enter Dujam Lingpa's practice of taking appearances to the mind as the object of meditation. Because there, if you prefer that an object, a mental appearance be different than what it is, what happens is that you are grasping to it, and then you become distracted by it. And so you need to surrender to the flow of appearances without seeing this radical impartiality of all appearances, not preferring that one appearance, not preferring pleasant appearances, for instance, over unpleasant appearances. So surrendering to the breath and allowing the breath to be what it is without demanding that it be different begins to prepare you for the surrender that is necessary for doing these more advanced practices that we'll be getting into in 2 days. So just a couple of points of technique now, very briefly. The key to stability is the exhalation, and the key to clarity is the inhalation. You will notice when you follow the full course of the exhalation that there is a natural relaxation response associated with the exhalation. In medical terms, this is called vagal toning, associated with the vagus nerve. which stimulates and relaxes the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And so medical research has found that there is a slight but perceptible increase in heart rate on the inhalation, and there is a slight but perceptible slowing of the heart rate on the exhalation. And my contention as a yogi is that just as you can move prana to different places of the body by focusing on them, that you can also accentuate this response of deepening relaxation on the exhalation by focusing on it, and by increasing the invigoration or the clarity by focusing on it, on the inhalation. So you can actually get this very noticeable balance of relaxation and clarity, so much so that you are deepening your relaxation so much that you will lose your object if you don't immediately on the next inhalation invigorate on the inhalation. So it's what I call walking the high wire or a tightrope. You're so finely balanced that your relaxation can be so much that it will tip you off the high wire, your balance of the high wire, into excitation because you become too relaxed. No, you become dull with the too much relaxation. And if you invigorate too much, then you become excited and distracted. So the key to stability is the exhalation. You exhale distraction, so individual thoughts, if you're focused on tactile sensations of the breath, you release individual thoughts, memories, fantasies that arise, you release those into space on the exhalation. Just let them leave your body and your mind. You also release agitated prana, just that agitated energy that carry agitated thought. You release that on the exhalation also. And then on the inhalation, you invigorate clarity. So the key to, so just recall this in technique, the key to stability is the exhalation. And my contention, my proposal to you is that you will never lose your object of meditation on the inhalation. It will always be on the exhalation as you are relaxing and releasing. Because what will happen is you relax and you release so much that halfway through the exhalation, you lose your engagement with the object. So just notice whether this is true for you, that if you make it to the end of the exhalation and the pause at the end of the exhalation and you are still focused on your object, you get a free ride. Mindfulness will automatically make it all the way through the inhalation because you are invigorating the quality of your engagement on the inhalation. So you need to be most aware of the possibility of losing your object and distraction on the exhalation. So this leads to a point of technique that I just discovered in my own practice. And I have been teaching this for a couple of years now, and people respond that this is a dramatic improvement in stability by employing this technique. So I talked about the power of intention this morning, how, and Lama Tsongkhapa talked about the power of intention, how when you form an intention in this moment, the power of intention influences what will fill your mind in the succeeding moments. And so the stronger your intention, the more moments will be filled with your intended object. So this is something that I suggest you try. In the pause after the inhalation, recall your intention, and your intention is to remain continuously engaged with the tactile sensations of the breath all the way through the full course of the exhalation to the pause. So that is your intention for practice. But you don't have to say those words, and in fact, you don't say those words. So intention can be instant, it can be wordless, it can be you raise your arm with the intention. Everything that you do is intention, but you don't actually say words. You have this instant intention that is almost simultaneous with the activity. But intention is what the mental factor that really directs and applies the mind. So here, let your intention be just to recall your intention, to remain continuously engaged with the tactile sensations of the breath all the way to the pause at the end of the exhalation. And because this is the time when you would, the exhalation is the time when you would lose your object, if you make it to the pause all the way at the end of the exhalation, you then get a free ride all the way through the inhalation to the point where you recall your intention again. So every cycle of breath, you are refreshing your intention. And by doing this, most people report that if you remember or you mindfully recall your intention in that pause before the exhalation, you are guaranteed to make it to the end of the exhalation. And so the real trick for mindfulness then is to remember to recall your intention. And then you get very quickly into a momentum. So after you do that and you get 10 breaths of continuous engagement, you begin to feel like tremendous stability and that you could really successfully do this for the full 24 minutes. So you can, if you reach this point of where you're just cruising, then you can drop the intention, the recalling your intention. But as soon as you recognize that you have been distracted again, then go back to recalling your intention and keep recalling your intention for a length of time, say 10 breaths or longer, so that it feels like you are just in flow now with continuous engagement. And then another key to developing stability, especially when we progress through from stage 3 of Shamata to level 4, at level 4 you are no longer losing your object entirely. Level 3, you are on your object 51% of the time. You're on your object, this is called continuous attention, and then I forget the name of the third one. It's on your chart. But basically what the key of getting from level 2 to level 3 is that you have to recognize that you have been distracted more and more quickly. Because at level 2, you are on your object only for about a minute or so at one time. At level 3, you are on your object 51% of the time. So that is a dramatic increase in the amount of time that you are on your object. And in order to do that, and in order to experience something that is called patching the gaps, meaning that you are off, the length of your distraction is so short that you can go back to your object without having to really reboot the whole meditation or reset everything. You just are cruising, basically, and you have enough momentum. Your distraction has been brief enough so that you can just really immediately engage with your object again. So in order to do that, what is that? Resurgent attention. So level 3 is called resurgent attention, and what is level 4 called again? Close attention is level 4. Thank you. So the key, though, for getting to make this progress is that you have to shorten the length of time that you're distracted. And the bad news about recovering from distraction is that it is just like attention, that it is the product of an unconscious weighing process. And so you can't will yourself to recover from distraction more quickly, but you can begin to influence it. You can begin to train the mind to recognize what is important, and then rather than your mind wandering and enjoying it for 5 minutes, you recover more and more quickly until you reach the point where you can recognize the first moments of distraction. So in order to shorten that length of time and in order to train your introspection to recognize that you have been distracted more and more quickly, the key is your reaction when you discover that you have been distracted. So there is a moment that happens, it's like an aha moment, where you're waking up from the dream and you recognize, oh, I've been distracted. This is not my breath that I've been focused on. I was salsa dancing. So you recognize that, and the key then to shortening the length of time that you have been distracted is your reaction when you discover that you have been distracted. So this is encapsulated in what Lama Allen calls the 3 R's and what I call the 4 R's. So I add another element that from other teachers that I think is very important, and most people respond by saying this has actually changed their meditation, the enjoyment of their meditation practice dramatically. So the first R is to release your grasp on the distracting object. I get confused sometimes with Lama Allen's presentation, which is a little different. So the way that it seems to work, to accord most with my experience, is, and you will really find the meaning of this when we get to working with mental appearances. But you release your grasp on the distracting appearance, the one that you wake up with. Because it's very much like waking up from a dream in the morning. Sometimes you don't really want to wake up. And sometimes the distraction can be very alluring. And you don't really, so you recognize that you have been distracted, but you don't fully release the distracting object and you go right back into it. So first of all, the first R is to release your grasp on the distracting object. The second R then is the novel one, and that is to rejoice, to be happy. You should take a moment to feel pleasure, to feel sukha, to feel well-being. And this is really, really important. For one, it is an antidote to what could be a well-trained habitual reaction to just go, shit. I did it again. I guess I'm no good at this. Maybe I have no talent for Shamata meditation. Or it could be my age. Maybe I'm developing Alzheimer's already, or something like that. You just go on and on and on like that, being critical of yourself. So this is the antidote to that. Because what is that? Is that productive? It's entirely counterproductive, because what are you doing? You haven't returned to your meditation. All you're doing is just started a whole nother chain of distracted associations and critical of yourself. And this is guaranteed to take all of the joy and all of the pleasure out of your meditation practice. If you're just hard on yourself for being distracted, come on. This is the most universal of all human experiences, is to be distracted while you're trying to focus your attention. So give yourself a break and rejoice. So what is it that you are rejoicing? So very important to actually pause and feel pleasure, a moment of happiness. And what is it that you are rejoicing about? It is your recovered lucidity. And by doing that, by rejoicing about your recovered lucidity, meaning you know now that you are aware, back in the present moment. You are fully aware of that. You are lucidly aware of that. And by doing that, you recognize how different this moment of lucidity was from the previous moments of non-lucid wandering. So before, it was like a non-lucid dream. You didn't know that you were dreaming. You didn't know the most fundamental fact that you were dreaming. Now you have awakened. And so you take a moment to recognize, this feels good, this lucidity, I like it. And I recognize how different this lucidity is to the previous moments of non-lucidity. So by doing that, you are training the unconscious processes that are going to alert you to wandering, that this is important. Lucidity is important. So in neural terms, probably you could say you're getting a shot of dopamine. The reward center is getting a shot of reward. So you're being recognizing that this is fun and that this is important. So you notice that. So you're going to notice then, because you are taking this moment to recognize the difference and that you are rewarding yourself with a sense of pleasure, you are going to recognize the opposite state of non-lucidity more and more quickly. And then the third R is to return to your chosen object. So this requires you to recollect with mindfulness what is your chosen object. So in this case, it would be the tactile sensations of the breath at the nostrils. And then the fourth R is to relax ever more deeply all the way through the full course of the exhalation. So it is release your grasp on the distracting object, rejoice, I am lucid again, this is it. And then to return to your chosen object, and then to relax ever more deeply all the way through the full course of the exhalation. And if you do this after you have been distracted, if you are distracted for some length of time, so that you have really lost engagement with the object, totally forgotten what you were meditating on, you reboot your meditation with these 4 R's. And not only are you rebooting, but then you are training introspective awareness, what is important in this unconscious weighing process, and you will then train the mind to recognize distraction and to spontaneously disengage from distraction more and more quickly until you reach the point where Lama Tsongkhapa says you can notice distraction before it even fully forms, while it is just beginning to form. So then your stability really becomes unshakable. And then just one more point about settling the breath in its natural state. Very, very importantly, you don't expel the breath. You don't push it out. You don't. But what you do, so the inhalation is created by an expansion of the chest cavity. And the diaphragm is expanding the chest cavity below, and your ribs are expanding. So this is creating a larger area so that there's less air pressure, and then the weight of the atmosphere is just naturally filling this larger cavity. So all you have to do really to release the breath is not to use the diaphragm to expel it, because that is effortful and forcing the exhalation. But you just relax the muscles that expanded the chest cavity, and then you get this very natural and even exhalation, and that it feels like relaxation, so that the exhalation itself is relaxing. So if you are expelling the breath, that is forceful, that's effortful. If you just relax the expansion of the chest, that just then is a very natural, even flow of the breath out of your chest as it shrinks. So let's just take a short break. Well, let's take a 6-minute break. And come back at 8:03 then, and then we will do that breath meditation focused on the nostrils.